Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you're local, we'd love for you to come and visit. Hang out with us one Sunday morning. Our service is at 10:30. If you're not local, but you're looking for that unicorn, a church that teaches the Bible, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, simply teaching God's Word, simply check us out online. We live stream our service on our YouTube page, which is calvary316.live. That's kind of the quick link to our URL. And then also we stream on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/calvary316. So a lot of easy ways to find us. Love for you to hang out with us either in person or digitally. So before I introduce the cast of characters, we've got a special guest with us tonight. I want to set the stage a little bit for tonight's show. We've got some fun things we're going to do. We've got a Spice Daddy Digs. We've got an Ifs with Creighton. A lot of fun things tonight. But let me set the stage for the show tonight. So Frank is a good friend of mine. I've known Frank for several years now. And Frank has a very unique perspective when it comes to history and like cool aspects of history, whether it's military history. Frank he's a veteran, very cool insights into various, old battles and things from World War II or Vietnam. But also just real cool historical things. So we were hanging out. This was maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And I love history. I'm a bit of a history nerd. I'm learning more and more and more that the history that we were often taught in our public high schools was very slanted, to speak mildly. It was, yes, big things, probably accurate, but there was a lot of liberal slant, a lot of bias. And it's been said that, history is written by the victors. And so, when you're going back into time and you're trying to learn lessons from history and I'm learning more and more some of the things that I think I know about. I really don't know as much as I did. Meaning, we were sitting, hanging out, and I asked Frank about, somehow we got talking about the Crusades, the Knights Templar, and Frank was blowing my mind, like asking questions, and just, I began to realize, and maybe you can relate, that in high school, when you're learning about this time period of history, the kind of the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, there's a lot we don't know, but like the Crusades in particular were very much phrased as like a very evil thing. Christian aggression, Christian nationalism, Christian persecution of those poor innocent Muslims. That might be as far from the truth as possible. And so it was just, the conversation was blowing my mind. So I really wanted to have Frank on the show to have kind of the same conversation about the Crusades, what they were, what they weren't. And maybe even getting into a little bit of like, well, why has the history been so warped? Has there been an agenda behind that? And as Christians, what should we learn? So that's what tonight's show is going to be about. We're going to talk about the Crusades, various ways of these things. We're going to talk about the Knights Templar and some very cool old school historical things. That being said, I am joined by Pope Creighton. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well.
I'll let you
see you guys all.
I'll let you let everybody know. Brought to you by Get Fed Today, and then you can introduce the rest of the characters.
Yeah, so the show today is brought by Get Fed Today. It's a podcast that we produce. We upload 5 Bible studies from 5 different Bible teachers that are all solid Bible teachers. It's a terrible sentence. We upload 5 a week. We're currently at, I think, 680 Bible studies. So if you're looking to get into learning the Bible and studying the Bible, but you don't really know where to start, or you just want to add more Bible studies to your normal weekly routine, Get Fed Today is a great podcast. We've got it on all of the podcasting platforms. So yeah, check it out. Get Fed Today. 5 Bible studies fresh every week. There's 680. So if you want to just binge hours and hours of Bible studies and want different perspectives, it's a great podcast.
This particular week, we actually rolled out, I think it was like 5 brand new guys. So we're introducing new Bible teachers, new content.
We're adding people kind of all the time. Now, to my left is Frank, who we have just discussed is our personal Templar expert.
He's also a dear brother at our church.
Yes, absolutely.
He's a friend. Great. We go hang out on his back deck on Mondays occasionally.
We like Frank a lot.
Yes.
And to his left is Justin, who's a guy.
What's up, my little pepper poppers?
That's right, Spice Daddy. How you doing, man?
Just pretty good. Just to let all my little pepper poppers know, this is the famous, if not infamous, Frank that gave me that hot sauce.
That is true.
That was featured on the last Pepper Poppers episode.
I got a text message in the middle of you guys losing it, where Frank was like, I absolved myself of all responsibilities. There had been warnings clearly issued that were not taken with seriousness.
And if you think you have found some hot sauce that you would like to be featured on my Pepper Poppers episodes, just hit us up at popecreighton@gmail.com, and I'm sure we could pass along the P.O. box for the church, and you could send it in. I'd be willing to take a shot at it.
Before we get to, we're going to do a Spice Daddy Digs. We had it scheduled for last week, and it got pushed. I just got a text message. ABC has suspended Jimmy Kimmel indefinitely.
I saw that.
Yeah, that's a major because
Over Charlie Kirk stuff?
Yeah, the comments that he made.
That was probably the straw that broke the camel's back on.
Well, and then the fact that the government was maybe going to try to pull the licenses for ABC and whatnot because of the disinformation being, that's
crazy.
There's still more to be said about the Charlie Kirk situation. In fact, I think next week I'm going to do an episode about a little bit more about what happened, but also we're learning more about the shooter and his motivations and just the whole transgender thing. And I have some thoughts. And so I think next week we're going to do an episode. I might title it, this is catchy, but Gladwell, Ponder, and the Book of Daniel. And so, it's Creighton, you're looking.
I have no idea what Gladwell and Ponder have to do with either of those. I assume the Book of Daniel is prophecy.
Nope.
Interesting.
It's about bowing down to idols and not standing up against social pressure.
You shouldn't tell us anymore because that's kind of our shtick.
I should just leave it.
Yeah.
I should leave it there. So hey, let's cue it up. We got a Spice Daddy Digs. You got it, Cray?
Yep.
All right.
Ancient secrets he brings to light. In his hands they shine so bright. Spicy daddy's got a knack for finding what others like. His heart beats with the old stones, and every artifact he knows.
What's up, my little pepper poppers? Back
But that's how you're starting the digs too, the Pepper Poppers?
They're my fan club is known as my Pepper Poppers.
Okay, I just needed some clarity.
Whether that be my Pepper Poppers or my Spice Daddy Digs.
So
Anybody that enjoys spicy foods and enjoys my content is known as my little Pepper Poppers.
So that's how you get home, and that's how you refer to your mother.
Do you not understand that I am a potential up-and-coming podcast star?
No, I do. I'm very aware of it.
I am preparing my fan base now for what they will be called in the future.
I love it, like Swifties.
Right.
You know what I love is just how smooth and
Professional.
concise this intro
No,
was.
this is great. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, he
that's
opened with
exactly
Pepper
what-
Poppers. I needed clarity.
You do understand we are an unscripted Bible study where anything could happen.
No, that's why I said I like it.
Yeah.
At least that's
No, it's great.
how Gronk describes us.
Right. I've been playing around with that a lot, and it's been awesome.
All right.
All right, go for it.
Spice Daddy
Anyway,
Digs.
I'm going to throw out a few of them that have recently popped up. They found a Roman garden under the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. They found this in April 2025. Underneath, done by Sapienza University of Rome and the Israeli Antiquities Authority. Underneath the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre. I'm not good
Sepulchre.
with Sepulchre. I'm not good with these Latin names. You're gonna have to help me out with this, Pope.
That's what Pope C's here for.
Yeah, that's what he's here for. They uncovered a first-century garden with an olive vine, seeds, pollen, and low stone walls. What's been really interesting in the past, I don't know, probably 20, 30 years, there's a thing called pollenology, which is study of pollen, and they've been able to find microscopic pollen particles, and they were able to kind of get an idea of what kind of plant life was in the area during that time.
It helps with timing and location, right?
Kind of, sort of. Just
because they did with the Shroud of Turin as well.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So like pollen is a very good indicator of the plants in the area or the plants of where something has been. And because a lot of plants are not as widespread as you would think, like not all apple tree, even though there's apple trees all over the world, not all apple trees are equal. So there's
you can tell their pollen apart.
Correct. And there's different variations and stuff like that. So you often find like certain plants that are only located in a certain small area. And we base that off of like pollen and stuff like that.
So they discovered this garden
underneath the Holy Sepulchre.
What's significant about it from your perspective?
Just because it kind of it describes a garden where near Jesus was crucified, and so it kind of just shows evidence of the area of Jerusalem during the first century. And that kind of just solidifies what we see in the Bible. And that's always cool to me, it might not seem like much, but a lot of people view the Bible and the things in the Bible as just kind of far off, like fairy tales. And to be able to put like physical evidence towards that is pretty cool.
Now, archaeologically, so if you go to Jerusalem, one of the most famous places that you stop is you go to the Garden Tomb, and you go and you see the old, what this is where you look in. This is where Jesus. It's an iconic thing. Like you've seen it. It's all over the internet. It's the tomb of Jesus. From an archaeological standpoint, how likely do you put that Jesus was actually buried in that tomb?
That's hard to say because it's not straightforward of Jesus was here, Jesus was buried here, but we have to rely on tradition at that point. And so you got two different fields of view. Basically on that, you have the orthodoxy view, and then you have the more, for lack of a better term, the Protestant view of where things were, where things are. But as of right now, it's just hard to say and like solidify concrete evidence because there isn't any. Just because you have the Roman Catholic, the Orthodox side of things, and then you have the Protestant view. So you have like the stuff inside the old city walls of modern day Jerusalem, and then you have the Garden Tomb,
right,
which is outside, and both present physical, like being able to see it evidence, but there's nothing solid that has been done archaeologically in the past.
It just was a curiosity question just related to the garden.
And so there's some things without knowing the exact, which we still don't know the exact layout of the old city walls, like complete. Without knowing that, it's hard to say.
Even the Roman walls?
We don't have a complete, like, did they dip here? Did they go there? Kind of thing. So,
and that's mainly because when Titus sacked Jerusalem,
correct.
The destruction, as Jesus predicted, not one stone would be left upon another, and so that becomes problematic.
Right. And another one that kind of goes more towards what we're studying right now on Sunday mornings at Calvary 316, which you can find at c316.tv. Or on our YouTube channel, which is
Calvary 316.
Calvary 316. Sennacherib's siege camp at Jerusalem. And so we found...
now, that was the Assyrians,
the
right?
Assyrians.
Yes.
So this is right before, basically 701 BC-ish.
Biblically, this is King Hezekiah. This is the prophet Isaiah, his ministry.
They have identified the site of a siege camp. So somewhere just outside the walls that the enemy camp, the Assyrians would have camped at and established a beachhead to then go into siege. So Jerusalem.
That's super cool because there's that story. So Hezekiah repents, all of Jerusalem with him. There's 185,000 Assyrians surrounding Jerusalem. The siege is going on. Jerusalem was a hard city to conquer because it was self-sufficient. in the sense it had its own water source. Food became scarce, which was a problem within the city walls. But if you recall, that night the angel of the Lord comes down and slays 185,000 Assyrians. However, while that's happening, like early in the morning, there's a couple lepers that are like, we're going to die anyway here, starving to death. We might as well go down into the camp and see if we can find any food, right? And so this group of lepers goes down, and they're the ones that discover that the entire army of the Assyrians have been annihilated, and they're going in and eating it like the king's table and having a smorgasbord, a feast. But they found evidence of the siege camp dating back to Sennacherib. That's
right,
awesome.
which I believe we haven't gotten to just yet on Sunday mornings, but you can find that in 2 Kings 18 through 19.
Yes.
Just kind of a little snippet of that.
Very cool.
And this kind of stuff is the stuff that got me into archaeology. Not that... So biblical archaeologists, as Christians, kind of have it easy because we already know that it exists because we believe in the Bible. But there's a lot of archaeologists that don't believe that the Bible is true. And so the fact that I can look at this and be like, oh, this has to be somewhere, whereas they're going around being like, oh, what is this kind of thing is
That's cool.
Is really cool. So there you go.
All right, Spice Daddy Diggs. Let's pivot. Mr. Frank, before we get to the specifics of the Crusades and the Knights Templar and whatnot, can you just give a little bit of just kind of your background as it pertains to these particular topics, just to establish kind of a footing for how you know the things that you know about this time period of history, what your exposures have been? You're a very well-traveled, seasoned man with a lot of experiences, but these experiences give you unique insights into these kind of topics.
Well, I am a veteran. I was in the Army, and beyond that, I had 30 years as a systems architect in the consulting business. When 9/11 happened, I got very interested in the conflict between Islam and Christianity and decided to start looking into it.
Mm-hmm.
What I discovered was there's a great deal of mythology, there's a great deal of people speculating about this, that, and the other, and most of academia who've written about the Crusades didn't have what I would call a reasonable military background, and their assumptions about some things tend to be far more academic and speculative rather than based on here's how armies do things. If you have a military background, what the Crusaders were doing, what the Templars were doing, doesn't look unusual. If you have an academic background, it seems strange and bizarre. So that was the perspective that I took to it, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out who were they, what were they doing, why were they doing it, what caused it all. I was basically an amateur's interest in researching that kind of information. I discovered that today there are literally something over 1,000 organizations that exist on the planet calling themselves Templars.
Which have no legitimate genealogical connection.
There are a couple of organizations that try to claim that they have a real heritage with the original Templars, but it's speculative as to whether they actually do because they don't want to show what they've got. So it's up for grabs as to whether anyone actually does. There's nobody who is a real military order with a monastic background that are trying to do anything from that point of view. There is even a drug cartel that claims Templar heritage. So there's no way to go, really back with that. We know that the last real Templars were burned at the stake in Paris. And that pretty much put an end to it. The people who survived all of that ended up going off on their own or to other military monastic organizations like the Knights of Malta, the Hospitaliers, the Knights of St. John. They ended up wandering off in that direction. There were some Templars who were basically covered for by the King of Portugal, and they ended up participating in the last wars of conquest between the Spanish and the Moroccan Muslims, so that when Ferdinand and Isabella took Spain or southern Spain from the Muslims, there were essentially leftover Templars involved in that. But to what degree and how old they were and all that, I don't have records for that.
Was there any truth to the link between the Freemasons and the Templars?
Well, the Freemasons certainly claim that, and they claim it because there were Templars in England, because there were commanderies all over Europe. There were Templars there. There was some problems with what was going on in England, because some of what was going on, there were already excommunicants in England at that time, and the Templars kind of hooked up with them. The Masons make a lot of claims about special knowledge and things like this. They get very into the construction of the Temple of Solomon, and all of that is part of Mason lore, got mixed up with Templar lore, and they ran away with it from there.
So there's no truth to the fact that Nicolas Cage found a bunch of treasure underneath the church there in Boston.
Well, or the church in Rosslyn, for that matter.
Okay.
But
How dare you question
Nicolas Cage, I know.
How dare you question Nicolas Cage?
So let me take one more step back for some context before we kind of wade into the nitty gritty. I think you set that up very well. Your religious background, because I also do think that adds another dimension to your insight. Because you have kind of a real broad, multi-diverse experience when it comes to Christianity.
I grew up as a Catholic, and then I went to Catholic school, which is a good way to cure you of being a Catholic. And then later on, as a result of being in the Army, I was aware of a war in 1973 taking place in Israel, and became aware out of that there were people who thought a lot of what was going on there was prophetic in nature. I had never heard any of that. Started being interested in what they had to say, and ended up getting led to the Lord one evening when I wasn't anticipating that happening, but it did. And next thing you know, it's 1973, I'm a Christian, and here we are now.
But you went from Catholicism to like a pretty fundamental Baptist kind of background, like Free Baptist, and then...
Yes, I got saved in a Baptist church, but I never really participated in that. My first involvement in Christianity outside of the Catholic Church was getting saved in a Baptist church, and then spending the next year involved with a ecumenical prayer group that had a mix of Catholics and Protestants in it. And that's where I discovered that it was possible to be a Catholic and a Christian, which was fundamentally different from my thinking.
And that, again, time period wise, you got a little taste of the Jesus movement through that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, I had met some of those when I was still a kid in high school in 1970. And they decided that it would be good to stand around me and pray at me.
So with your background, let's go all the way back to kind of the origins of some things that set the stage for Crusades. So obviously Jesus, his ministry, this all takes place. Jesus dies, is buried in a tomb. He's resurrected 3 days later. He ministers for 40 days. He ascends to heaven. 10 days after that, the Feast of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit gets poured out on a group of people in Jerusalem. We have the birth of the church. The church remains fairly centralized in Israel and Jerusalem until a few waves of persecution forces Christians out of Jerusalem. They start, Philip, according to the book of Acts, goes to Samaria. You have Christians that are going up to, not Samaria, but they're going up to Syria and Antioch. And then you read through the rest of the book of Acts, you see the widespread of Christianity across the Roman Empire. You later on will read about the two letters that Peter wrote about Peter's involvement in the spread of Christianity, and then the church takes off. Like, it begins even after that first apostolic generation. The church is growing leaps and bounds. It's a big threat to Rome and so there's new waves of persecution initiated by Nero, and then you would have another one by Diocletian, and you'd have these waves of persecution, but the church would continue to grow, continue to expand. But the church was kind of like, its phases within the Roman Empire kind of teetered on being illegal to being tolerated until you get to Constantine.
Right.
And when we get to Constantine, and we're now in the 300s, there is a dramatic shift in the official posture of, at this point, which is kind of a declining Roman Empire. There's transitions that are happening, but Constantine adopts Christianity, probably for political purposes. Shrewd politician, but he adopts Christianity as being the official state religion of the Holy Roman Empire. There's a merging of the church and the state that commences. And in part of that, Constantine, like, there's now a renewed interest of the church into the territory that at this point has been largely avoided, in that being Israel. Jerusalem's been in ruins. Different groups have occupied it. But it was really through Constantine that now the church, Rome, becomes this thing. You have more of the constituting of papal authority, involvement. You got a splittering with the Roman Orthodox Church. Again, I'm flying through
Council of Nicaea.
Flying through history here. But really under Constantine, and I think his mother was Helene.
Yes. Saint Helene.
Saint Helene. That there was an interest in going back to the Holy Land and identifying these famous places and building churches and whatnot. So that's where you get like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You've got all these things. Spice Daddy's here rolling his eyes. Again, no training in archaeology, but we're just looking at the historical reality.
Look at that rock over there. Mary must have sat on that when she was on her way to give birth to Jesus. Let's put a church there.
There is certainly some evidence or I should say lack of evidence, for deciding this is that spot. This spot over here must be something else. There was no real archaeology done. There was Saint Helene walking around with a bunch of Arabs going, what do you think that is?
Right. But my point in bringing it up is not to talk about the archaeological elements, which you can go through these, like that could be a fun Spice Daddy digs going through some of these places. But my point, and for our conversation this evening, is that church merges with the state. Church state has a specific renewed interest, curiosity, and these holy places. They're in Jerusalem in particular, and like it becomes very Christianized. Now there were no Muslim elements, didn't exist yet. So, but it was mainly Christians. There was an Orthodox element. Jews, there was a remnant of Jews that were still occupying the area, and what we called Arabs, like just not Islamists, not Muslims, but Arabs from Saud to Transjordan to other areas that were also living in the area. But you had a lot of money put into the building of these churches, these shrines.
Oh, yes.
There's the discovery of various what we would call relics and artifacts. That becomes its own big business. There's a big tourism element. There's pilgrimages taking place. But then fast forward, let's say conservatively 250 years. And now you have Muhammad coming onto the scene. And you have the coalition of these what would have been nomadic splintered tribes under now the banner of a sword in this new religion instituted by the prophet Muhammad, and under the banner of Allah, a monotheistic God, stealing a lot of the concepts from the Jews and Christians. But there was an immediate interest of this new religion and what would also be kind of a political movement of Jerusalem, because again, it is a holy site for monotheism, and that creates a bit of an initial conflict because you have Christians that are occupying a space, no doubt Jews still there, but now you have the Arab world unified under a religious banner,
Right.
now finding renewed interest. Muhammad never mentions in the Quran Jerusalem, never once, but the legend is that the Dome of the Rock is built where Muhammad left Earth to go and visit heaven and come back.
In a dream.
That's why they built the Dome of the Rock there. You have the the mosque that's also built on the holy site that they believed had been Solomon's temple, which you'll get to Knights of the Templar. That's why they get the name. But that initiates a tension in the region. Right. And from that point, just anything you want to correct of the way that I set that up?
No, it's simply a historical fact that Jerusalem was in the hands of the Byzantine Empire when it was taken by the conquering Muslims.
Can I ask you to define the Byzantine Empire?
The Byzantine Empire was essentially what was left of the Roman Empire when the Eastern and Western empires split. And it was headquartered in Constantinople, which is essentially in Turkey. And that empire continued to exist. I don't remember the last dates, but the last of it went away with the advance of the Seljuk Turks. And they were
Ottoman Empire.
Pre-Ottoman actually.
Pre-Ottoman.
And essentially, they were an Islamic force that came in and conquered Constantinople. There is a giant church there, which was originally a cathedral, which is now a mosque in Constantinople. I think it's called the Blue Mosque.
Yes,
something like that.
there was a terrorist attack there a few years ago.
Yeah.
Hagia Sophia.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can go. That is originally a church from the Byzantine era. And
It's not called Constantinople. What's the name of the city now?
Istanbul.
Istanbul. Yeah.
And
So-
not because of the song.
Istanbul and Constantinople. Yeah, gotcha.
And as I understand it, there's a Muslim precept that any place that has ever been conquered by Muslims must always be reconquered if taken away, which is part of the problem with southern Spain, which is part of the problem with areas up north of Constantinople up into Romania. That's where we get some of the problems in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It's a precept that it must always come back to Islam. That's a lot of what the problem is in Gaza.
Right.
So that's the stage setting for what happens when Islam takes Jerusalem away from the Byzantine Empire. And now you've got Jerusalem and the holy sites for Christendom being held by Islam. Now, Islam was not prohibiting people from going to those sites, but they were making it difficult. And at the time, and still to this day, those sites were managed by a consortium of the various churches, the Eastern Orthodox, the Catholics, the Ethiopians, all had say in how those sites were managed. Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the focus point of that. And that became a problem for the rest of European Christianity. This just can't be tolerated. And Pope Urban II issued a speech, a sermon, it was not, to my knowledge, documented as an official bull, but I have the English translation of what he said. And essentially, it is a call to arms. We have to go and we have to take it back. And it initiated the First Crusade, and it was.
What year are we talking?
Oh, what year was that?
Like 10 something, right?
1095.
1095. So a quick recap to set the stage for what we know as the Crusades is that Jerusalem, which had been largely left in ruins following Titus Vespasian's sacking of it in 70 AD, becomes a centralized holy place for Christianity.
Yes.
Via the work of Helene, but through Constantine. It becomes central to the Byzantine Church, and then yet with the rise of Islam, we're probably talking about 700-800s.
600s.
The 600s is when Islam, but when does Jerusalem get captured by the Muslims? 7, okay.
Yeah.
But it gets captured. It gets,
Yes.
So it is a Christian holy city that gets taken over by the Muslims.
Yes.
And as a result of that and the difficulties of Christians being able to access their holy sites, it would be like imagining a Christian America went and took Medina. Like or Mecca. You're gonna get, we took it and then we make it very hard for Muslims to go and visit their holy sites.
Right.
There's going to be a problem inherent to that.
Just like it is today with Jews visiting the Temple Mount.
Correct. Because the Temple Mount's actually under the control of the PLO,
Right.
Palestinian Authority. So that sets the stage. So things are difficult. Christians are not being able to make pilgrimages. They're not being able to access their holy sites. And so the Pope, again, his name was Pope what?
Pope Urban II.
Issues this, he gives this sermon, and it's a call to arms and action.
Right, and it's actually fairly brief.
And then read it. Let's share that.
Most beloved brethren, urged by necessity, I, Urban, by the permission of God, chief bishop and prelate over the whole world, have come into these parts as an ambassador with a divine admonition to you, the servants of God, although, O sons of God, you have promised more firmly than ever to keep the peace amongst yourselves and to preserve the rights of the church, there remains still an important work for you to do, for your brethren who live in the East are in urgent need of your help, and you must hasten to give them the aid which has often been promised them. For as most of you have heard, the Turks and Arabs have attacked them, and have conquered the territory of Romania, the Byzantine Empire, as far as west as the shore of the Mediterranean and the Hellespont, which is called the Arm of St. George. On this account, I, or rather the Lord, beseech you as Christ's heralds to publish this everywhere and to persuade all people of whatever rank, foot soldiers and knights, poor and rich, to carry aid promptly to those Christians and to destroy the vile race from the lands of our friends. Moreover, Christ commands it. All who die by the way, whether by land or by sea, or in battle against the pagans, shall have immediate remission of sins.
One component is, give us a little, and this ties into the motivation is clearly referenced. So you had, though, in Jerusalem, operating these churches. I mean, you had Christians. I mean, there was a heavy Christian population that now is under Muslim authority, control. Right. They've been conquered.
Yes.
What did life, I mean, life was not good in that dynamic for these people.
And they were living under, I don't remember the exact Muslim term, but they have an official status for people of the book where once a year you had to endure being slapped. You had to wear goofy-looking shoes with a pointy curled end, and you weren't allowed to build anything new without permission. You weren't allowed to fix anything broken without permission, and you had to pay a significant tax. That was how you could live as a person of the book under Muslim leadership.
So the Pope issues this edict. We've got our brothers, sisters are suffering. This has been conquered. It's ours. And what happens next? I mean, what was the response to that?
Well, the first response was actually quite enthusiastic. A bunch of people who were not trained in military operations started heading towards the Holy Land, and they were walking, they were on foot. It was going to take them a while to get there. They weren't prepared, they weren't funded, they weren't soldiers, and they were all killed when they got there.
Was this the Children's Crusade?
It's referred to that way, and there were a lot of children.
And there's some mythology around that.
Yes, and it's not well documented. There was one particular monk that got all ginned up and was motivating everyone to go, and we cannot. The most important factor in this bull by Urban II is he declared that whatever happened on the way and while you were on the way was covered under the forgiveness of sins. We as Protestants might look at that and laugh and think that's ridiculous. But at the time, the Catholics of that world, there weren't any Protestants.
Right.
And the Catholic theology of that time, that was real. That meant something to them. It meant that it was a chance for salvation despite the life you have led.
In some ways, so the only guarantee of paradise within Islam is jihad. It's death within holy war.
It's not the only guarantee, but it is a guarantee.
Right.
There are very few guarantees of anything else in Islam.
But death in holy war and conflict
is supposed to be one of them.
Is supposed to be one of them. And so it's similar within concept of like, hey, you have a lot of poor Roman Catholics. Life is hard at this time period.
We're talking Dark Ages.
Right. And so, the prospects of, remission of sin, fame, glory, purpose. I think in contrast, though, that this was not a motivation of money or necessarily territorial gains or whatnot.
No. Some of that came about later as a result of the First Crusade. The first real part of the crusade where the military people from the various kingdoms came down, and they actually succeeded in taking Jerusalem, and they did it in the harshest, most military method of the day.
So we'll get to that. So First Crusade, the Children's March, Children's Crusade, they all die.
Yeah, they all die. They simply were not prepared to be there.
A lot of them died from natural cause, right? I mean, just the brutality of the trip.
The trip itself was a problem. There were problems with the trip in that various villages and cities that were along the way ended up dealing with all of these, what amounts to refugees, coming through Hungary and stealing everything that wasn't nailed down to eat. But it was okay because their sins were covered.
Right.
That became a problem on more than one occasion. But in any event, the First Crusade, the official First Crusade, is not really the Children's Crusade. It's the actual military crusade that takes place by various kings in Europe saying, okay, we're going to provide a real military force.
So in totality, there were roughly like 8 or 9 different crusades, right?
Yes.
Over the span of 300 years.
Some of them were big, some were relatively small. Very few were... there was never a succeeding crusade that was as successful as the First Crusade.
Okay, so let's talk about then the First Crusade, which is the next one after the first failed attempt.
Right.
Where a bunch of innocents die.
And in the First Crusade, we're talking 1096. From 1096 to 1099. The People's Crusade, the Children's Crusade. And then we move to 1097. the main campaign, they captured Jerusalem in 1099. And that capturing of Jerusalem in 1099 is where a lot of mythology about the Crusades from the Arab point of view and from the Christian point of view differ.
Okay, explain that. Explain what the general mythology is, and then argue against it.
The mythology about it is that the Crusaders came down, they took Jerusalem, killed everything that they could find. And that generally is true. But it's done without the full context. When they came to Jerusalem, they essentially did what they always do when taking a fortified city. They said, we're here, you can surrender, or we'll take you by force. In any medieval war, if you were forced to lay siege, whoever was there when you took it died. And that's what happened. The Arabs say that the blood ran in the streets up to the forelocks of a horse. Who can document that and say that it's true or not? I don't know.
Right.
But everybody in Jerusalem, regardless of who they were, Christian, Jew, Arab, most of them were killed. So
it was a military assault.
Yes.
That was a bloodbath. Now, you said that there's some mythology to that, though. And
well, the mythology has to do with whether or not the streets ran, to the horse's knees in blood.
The full extent of the slaughter.
There is some evidence that people went up to the Al-Aqsa Mosque or whatever predated it and were on the rooftops hiding out from the Crusaders. Some of those people survived, some did not. They hunted down anybody they even suspected of being Muslim and killed them. That much is true.
Had there been, prior to that, had there been evidences of Muslim aggression in brutal ways against Christians or non-Muslims?
If there were, I haven't run across it. I haven't seen any documentation of that type, and it's not the kind of thing that I've written down. There wasn't a lot of evidence. In Jerusalem itself, they weren't really doing that much because they were looking at the non-Muslims as a source of income because of the high taxes. So we're not going to kill the golden goose.
So First Crusade, they take Jerusalem.
Yes, they did. They took it, and in that process, they took the entire Western Levant, all the way down from Turkey down into Gaza. And they
controlling the ports and all of it, right?
They divided it up into various kingdoms and counties and established a king in Jerusalem. And that became the kingdom of Jerusalem, and then there was the county of Odessa and Aleppo and Acre.
Now, how long did they then? So, I mean, hey, we've reconquered the Holy Land. Mission accomplished. What happens next?
Well, and the Templars were not formed at that point.
Right. No Templars yet.
The Templars get established later. There was a problem with, even though they had conquered Jerusalem, that initiated a whole new wave of what amounts to Christian tourists coming out of Europe on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. They would arrive at various ports, try to make their way to Jerusalem, and were preyed upon by various banditry that saw these people as coming in with money and goods and everything else that we can steal from them. And the Western Europeans were like, we can't keep up with this. And there was an organization at that time called the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre. And they were essentially a paramilitary force run by the prelates of the churches that ran the Holy Sepulchre. And that was like a committee of the various churches. And those guys were supposed to be involved in helping secure the pilgrims, but they really didn't have any control of the outside of Jerusalem. and the methodologies by which because people were arriving on foot from both having crossed through Turkey and down. They were also coming in the port of Acre. I don't know if they were coming in through what we now call Tel Aviv. I don't know if they were coming in that port at that time, but in any event, something had to change. So one of the guys who had been in Jerusalem originally for the First Crusade had gone back to France. A guy named Hugh de Paynes. He came back to Jerusalem and left his wife, his family, he was apparently of noble heritage, but I don't know what else he had in France. But he came back to Jerusalem with some of his own relatives. And they arrived in Jerusalem, said, we're going to do something about this, and went and approached the king and said, here we are, we're going to start doing this, we need a place to stay. He supported the idea. They approached the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre about what they were planning to do, and from my understanding, divided duties about you guys handle in Jerusalem and we'll handle outside of Jerusalem. They were given, because they were knights, they also had their entourage, which were the people who take care of the horses. Knights at that time typically had more than one horse. They had their armor. They were like a very early notion of a tank. They had lances and spears and axes and shields and armor. A horse would have all of that accoutrement. They would have more than one horse, and it took people to take care of all that.
Right.
So they had to have some place to stable, and the king gave them the Temple Mount.
Right.
And they were using one of the mosques as a stable.
Yeah, the Elasis Mosque, that's where they got the Knights Templar.
Their original name was the Poor Knights of the Temple of Solomon. Now, something was going on with them. They had another agenda, because as soon as they took that spot, they began what would amount to an archaeological dig, and they were quite serious about it, because they started digging straight down and then started digging horizontal tunnels all under
the Temple Mount. Right.
And they're still there. I mean, those tunnels were redug again, I think, somewhere around the time of World War One. It was a British archaeologist that started digging around in that.
But they abruptly returned. Legend has they found some things.
Well, that's the legend part. We don't know for a fact. But there came a point where all 9 of the original Templars got on their horses and traveled to Rome as fast as they could go. What took place to motivate them to do that is speculation. It's just speculation. There's speculation that it involved they found the Grail. There's speculation that they found the Ark of the Covenant. There's speculation that the Shroud of Turin was involved. There's reasonable evidence that they believed they found wood from the true cross.
I'd lean more towards the Shroud of Turin, just if you've ever looked at the history of that.
But what we know for sure, but what they brought, we don't know. But we do know that the 9 dudes mounted up. They were doing some digging. They were on the Temple Mount. They geared up, and they rode directly to Rome. That's incontrovertible. That's a fact, a history. And then explain what happened next, because they didn't meet with the Pope.
They met with the Pope. They had a conversation, and the next thing you know, the Pope says, okay, you guys are a serious thing. And he makes them a order under the church. And he sends them to a guy named Bernard of Clairvaux, who had written the Cistercian order for Cistercian monks. And he sends them to him to get basically a write-up for how to be warrior monks, Up until that time, no such thing existed. And this was unusual and met with some resistance inside the church about, you can't have monks going around killing people. But
It's like the church's secret service.
basically, and as time went by, more and more power was given to the Templars. One, they were immune from extra government taxes. They reported only to the Pope. They didn't even report to local bishops and cardinals. They reported only to the Pope. And they started a fundraising system at that time, and the Pope put out some documents that basically said, if you donate to the Templars, those donations can amount to up to 1/7 of the time that you would have spent in purgatory. So it was essentially
Right.
an indulgence,
It's a payoff.
a way to buy your way out. And they had a phenomenal fundraising at that point. They spent a couple of years back in Europe and then went back to Jerusalem, except now they were a much bigger organization, and they had come up with a system, the monastic order, which you can find online and read it. It was no joyous lifestyle. I mean, these guys were up at 4 every morning to take care of horses and do all those things. There were 4 types of Templars. There were the Knights Templar, who were actually knights before they came to the Templars. They had to be of noble heritage. They had to have a knighthood already conferred upon them. They already had to know how to fight, do all the things a knight would
Right.
do. They also had Templar sergeants, who were essentially all the infantry and working troops.
They just hadn't been knighted.
They hadn't been knighted. But they were also things like shipbuilders, financiers. They administered the commanderies, because part of what could be donated to the Templars was not just money, but it was property. And so some noble lord could donate some property to the Templars, which would then exclude that from taxation, but it would also mean he just bought himself a significant amount of time out of purgatory. And while these concepts seem crazy to us, they were serious to them.
So they are now part of this whole crusade dynamic.
Right.
Kind of run us through, just with the sake of time, the ebb and flow of the next couple hundred years, and then where it kind of ends.
There was a constant drumbeat of Muslim attempting to take back Jerusalem. There came a point at a place called the Battle of Hattin, where there was a guy named Baldwin who was king of Jerusalem. He got some bad advice. The Templar Knights, the Crusaders under Baldwin, all went out to meet a Muslim leader called Saladin. I think he was out of Egypt, and the Muslims basically sucker punched these guys into coming out and tracking around out in the open desert. They waited till they were all worn down for lack of water and everything else, and the battle was a massacre. The Crusaders got beaten very badly. That resulted in Jerusalem being taken by Saladin. During that battle, the Battle of Hattin, there came a point where there were approximately 200 Crusader Knights. Some say 200, some say 230. There were Crusader Knights and Templar Knights mixed together. The Templar Knights in particular were not allowed to surrender. Part of the credo. And the Muslims had a deal where if they would capture somebody, they would give them the opportunity to convert or die. Well, they lined up these 200 Templars and they said, you can convert or die. And they approached them one at a time, and all 200 Templars said no and were subsequently beheaded one at a time. There is a lot of speculation down through history about these guys were just in it for the money. They were just there to try and get some land. They were all second sons and didn't have anything better to do. Yeah, that sounds all good until somebody stands over you with a sword and says, convert or die.
These were men of deep religious conviction.
They believed why they were there.
Yeah, that's so metal. You were telling us that earlier. That's like the idea of being the 200th guy and watching 199 people
Your friends.
Right.
get beheaded, and then you know what they're going to ask you.
Yeah.
But like
And then standing firm. I mean, that's
like-
super metal. It's super cool.
to your point of, who these people were, you had like Richard the Lionheart. Like he ends up being a crusader. Like you had actual like
Right.
kings of nobility and of a lot of wealth. And
there were several occasions. King of France, King of Germany, Richard the Lionheart. He came along actually much later.
Right.
But the King of France and King of Germany came up with this plan that they could never agree on. They came into Egypt first, and then we're going to go up into Palestine, and they never succeeded at anything. And eventually, they had to borrow money from the Templars in order to evacuate back to England or back to Europe. It was a terrible failure, mostly because they couldn't, between the two of them, decide how to approach the problem and not get their egos in the middle of it.
now over time, the Muslim stronghold of Jerusalem becomes pretty sure. The Crusades end up ending.
Richard the Lionheart actually showed up. He made enough of an impact that he secured a new and better agreement with the Muslims for letting in Christian pilgrims. As soon as he went back to England, that kind of fell apart. In that process, the Templars were needing kind of a new place to be. They were still in Acre, but there were a lot of Templars that were dispossessed, essentially. And it was Richard the Lionheart that gave them, not Crete, the other one.
Malta.
No. It's split in half between Turkey and...
That's Crete.
That's Crete, okay.
Yeah.
He gave them that, and they started planting vineyards and doing all the things that they normally do to support themselves. And those vines are still there. You can buy a wine today called Commandery. It's from those vines.
Fascinating.
There is a story, I don't know the facts, but it is believed that those vines were eventually migrated to Portugal and became the basis of the Portuguese ports.
Huh. So looking at this from like two different angles, if you could sum up what like the modern secular presentation of the Crusaders, like what is most fundamentally wrong with the way that the Crusades are presented in today's academia?
Well, today it's presented as if the Crusaders went down there just to beat up Muslims, and that the Muslims had some fundamental right to be there. That's ridiculous. The Muslims took it from Christianity, and whether or not we want to get into a debate about whether we should be venerating sites and all that kind of thing, that's a different debate. The fact is, it was held by a Christian empire. The Muslims took it, and the Crusades were a response to that.
Right.
They were not an initiation. The other side of it, I think that it comes down to is...
It was determined to be a necessary reaction to Muslim aggression.
Right. It was a reaction to Muslim aggression. It occurred over and over again. The biggest problem I have with the Crusades is how badly they were managed. But the Templars were the outliers in that even Saladin feared the Templars because they understood in no uncertain terms they will not surrender they will kill all of you. And the European kings recognized that when you're in a fight with the Templars, it's best to be behind them, not in front of them.
Understood that, right. So, first big misconception is that this is somehow Christianity's fight against the Muslims when, and it as a fact of history, these were significant, recognized, accepted historical sites of Christianity for at a minimum 300 years before Islam even comes into existence. Place that into the context that America is only 250 years old.
Exactly.
Gives you some it had been this way for many generations.
Right. There's not new news.
And so it's like this new religion pops up making claims that these are their holy sites when there's no historical substantiating background to that. It was an attack on Christian holy sites and the abuse of the people that ran it, the prohibiting of religious pilgrims that necessitated the Crusaders taking action. Again, not how you heard that in your public high school. I'm sure of that. I know in some regards we got to be tactful. But the reason I wanted to have this conversation is that we look at what's happening in the Western world today. A lot of different things related to this, but we see what has to be understood. Maybe not provable, but at least empirically recognized or understood to be a systematic attempt of the Muslim world to conquer the West.
Absolutely.
We see this.
It's a mandate.
We see this within Europe. We see, and Europe's 50 years ahead of us. But you can look in America in places like Dearborn, Michigan, or where we've allowed unchecked Muslim migration to come into the West, and we look at it as like, okay, as well, Christians just shut up and go along with it. But like we've been in a war for 1,500 years that we have just more recently said, oh, well, we're not in a war, but we are. And that's what I think that's why the way textbooks present the Crusades is so warped, because it wants to neuter Christians from even recognizing that there is and has been a historical defensive predicate of Muslim aggression towards Christianity and Christians needing to defend themselves. Did I say that right? I mean,
and there is a difficulty because many Christians believe that Christianity is a religion that requires passivity, requires nonviolence. Then again, you look back at Christianity down through history, and it's suffered from violence horribly in the initiation of Christianity through all the Roman martyrs. And there weren't just Romans, there were others. But martyrs have always been the blood that feeds the garden. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we are all supposed to simply knuckle under to anything like Islam, which means submission, where they radically distort their own heritage. They honestly believe that they worship the God of Abraham when all the evidences indicate that's not the case. They persecute Judaism, which is specifically anti-biblical. They persecute Christianity with all sorts of outrageous heretical statements about Jesus and the virgin birth and the resurrection. Those things prevent us from ever coming to a, quote, meeting of the minds with Islam. It's not possible. It's simply not.
Truth. And again, just to reiterate for clarity, you look at Israel. If you go back to the Old Testament, God had given this land to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob.
Right.
And they had been in Egypt, become a nation. God's like, go back, and this is your land. So take it. This is your land. And God was very clear on the borders of what that land was to be. Mm-hmm. And there had been all kinds of people groups that had moved in, and there was all kinds of demonic motivation and influences of that. The Nephilim, the Zamzummim, the basic Canaanites, like you have all kinds of
The Amalekites.
You have, and then later the Philistines. But so you have, like, God was clear, like, do you need to go and aggressively take your land back? Like, it's
Very aggressive.
It's a command and conquer. Take your land. But what's interesting about that is at no point did God ever give instructions to Israel to command, to attack, to conquer any other nation outside of their border. Mm-mm. This was your turf, and you defend it. It was the mandate, the principle at play within the Old Testament was one of self-determination and self-defense. This is our land. God has given it to us. And hey, you can live wherever you want to. And there was even processes for traveling through and immigration, and like there was all kinds of Levitical laws for entertaining the stranger and taking care of the stranger, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it was not God's people, after they had taken the land, was to be in a position of defending what God has given, not being on the offense to take new territories. My point within that, is that as Christians, we don't go and attack people that have contrary beliefs that we have. Mm. We're not going and attacking Muslims. We're not going and shooting bullets at trans people. Like, we are not on the offense in a militaristic standpoint. Our offense is we go into the nations of the world with the gospel to make disciples of the nations, converting them in the name of Jesus. It's not evangelism by the sword, aka Islam. It's one through persuasion towards conversion. Our offense is on a spiritual plane, but the principle does carry forth that we can still self-defend. We have the right biblically of self-determination and self-defense, meaning that if you see our land in our area, like we have as Christians a right to self-determination and self-defense, and Jesus warns to that. Jesus says, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That was not a prohibition of the sword. It was the acknowledgement that you live by it, you may die by it. Mm-hmm. Which is the warning I think Jesus gives. But to me, it's we look at what's happening, and it's like, how dare you speak up about Muslim aggression? Well, I think biblically, we should speak up about this.
It's not like it's new news.
And this has been going on, and you've tried to frame the Crusades to neuter and defang Christians, when it's like, no. Like, we are not the aggressors, but we are absolutely entitled to defend and to protect the rights and the freedoms that we feel like God has given us. We don't have a land in that sense, but we do have rights that have been given to us by God. And like you mentioned, those rights are fundamentally different than those of Islam, or for that matter, the trans lobby or the Rainbow Coalition or what have you. And we're not trying to take them over militarily or aggressively, but we can defend ourselves. And I think right now, especially in light of some of the things that have been happening, some of the things going on, like this whole deal, it's a powder keg. We're going to see it ignite in Europe first, and I would say Ireland maybe more specifically. and it's going to get ugly. But we've allowed this, and we have allowed, I think, liberal academia to lull us into a sense of like that there's something inherently wrong in self-determination, self-preservation.
No. I've got one final story about the Templars.
Yes.
That for me establishes who they were and the truth of what they believed. And it has to do with the very last Grand Master. He was taken by the French king and held and tortured into admissions of all kinds of heresies and things. And if you're tortured sufficiently, eventually you'll say something. They were then given an opportunity in Paris to publicly talk about their confession. And his response to that was, I was tortured into that confession, and I will not publicly say it. And he knew when he did that they would burn him at the stake. And he was burnt at the stake for not confessing to those alleged crimes. It'll take a half an hour to talk about what those crimes were alleged and all of the accusations that went against the Templars about heresy, and I think I can explain some of that, but there was no heresy, and the Curia in Rome determined there was no heresy, and it was only in the 1990s that they actually found the Curia document stating they found
Interesting.
No heresies. Somewhere that document got hidden, but in any event, when he was being burned at the stake, he cursed the French king. The French king was dead in a year. So,
hot dang.
the Templars
Freedom fries, you know what I mean?
The for everything that they might, people accuse them of hypocrisy, they accuse them of heresy, they accuse them of being involved in money, and they were. I am very much a believer in that they initiated what we call the banking system of today. I think the evidence that's really clear. I don't believe in a Templar treasure in Oak Island or buried in Rosslyn. I think the Templar...
Or behind Mount Rushmore.
No. I think that money ended up in the hands of some refugee Templars in Switzerland and started something there.
Interesting. I so appreciate you being on the show and talking about what is an off-the-wall topic. You were not expecting conversation about the Crusades and the Knights Templar, but that's what makes the show fun, is that we're doing different things all the time. Spice, you got any final thoughts? Creighton, we're not going to get to your ifs tonight. We'll push that to next week.
Nope, we'll do it next week. It'll be a fun one.
That's why we do it every week.
I mean, aside from I have a direct connection to Richard Lionheart, Third Crusade, just family based on that.
The original Spice Daddy?
The original Spice Daddy, Sir John de Holcomb, started the Holcomb clan there. But you saying that Christians have a call to, I guess you could say, aggressiveness on defending their territory, and that just kind of brought up in my mind Joshua 24. He said, "But for me and my house, I will serve the Lord."
Yeah.
You as not just a Christian man, I guess is who I'd mostly be speaking to. Like, you have a calling in your life to aggressively defend the borders of your home.
I love it.
And
your
family, and you have a calling for a crusade for that. So, those in your household, serve the Lord and make your crusade of that.
We've even gotten into say you're on a crusade has been within our lexicon like a dirty word or a negative accusation, when it's like, no, I am on a crusade for truth, for righteousness,
right,
to defend those things, and I'm going to be aggressive on that. Because that's what God has called me to do as a man. Right. I love that word. Even as a parent of teenagers, there's a picture floating around on the internet of the kid that was the shooter for Charlie Kirk, and it was like him getting his first computer and all the toys, and there was like his parents had posted this, and it was like, now he can officially ignore us all the time. Like, and it was supposed to be tongue in cheek, but they had given that kid they did not defend.
Right.
They opened a portal to influences that they had no control, no say. As a parent of a teenager, we should be on a crusade to defend our kids, to protect our home from a very, very real enemy. Maybe not a Muslim, but a very real enemy known as Satan, that is absolutely dead set on stealing, killing, and destroying everything that's good in your life or your kids' lives.
Right, and I think that goes further. Just for people like me, like who doesn't have a family. Like I don't have a.
We're your family,
right? But like I have a call in my life to defend those around me who are my brothers and sisters, and even at my job, who I don't work with a bunch of believers, but I have a calling to defend my territory, which is basically wherever I'm at. I'm the spearhead of my battle in this world.
Amen. Amen.
For that. So when it kind of goes back to our episodes on missionary work, once you leave the church property, once you leave your house, you are in the mission field, and therefore you are on a crusade at that point. So defend it.
I love it. Pope C.
Man, you guys said it all. I really enjoyed this. I was talking to Frank earlier. Basically, everything I know about the Crusades, I learned from The Kingdom of Heaven, which is...
God wills it.
A terrible movie.
Yeah, I totally didn't enjoy every minute of it and have watched it multiple times. I love that movie. But yeah, God wills it.
Deus Vult.
Deus Vult.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight with the Outlaw Radio Show. So glad that you were with us. If you're watching, what you've just watched will be released tomorrow on our podcast, which is... available on Apple, Google, Spotify. If you're listening to this, we live stream on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. And so come join us, put a face to a name, and hang out with us on Wednesday. Thank you so much for being with us. Everything you can find at outlawradio.org. God bless and see you next week.